Well, there is no question that in the next few decades, especially, having a different option is very important.
You moved to Singapore. I've described this as sort of a legacy, not only for yourself, but a legacy for your children, that they'd be able to be multilingual. They would be able to have that optionality. Talk about using internationalization as a way to benefit future generations.
Well, there is no question that in the next few decades, especially, having a different option is very important. Maybe people don't want to leave their country where they are, and that's fine. But if you want to have a different option, you should. My children know Chinese fluently, they know English fluently, but I have tried to give them the option to be able to be anywhere in the world. Not only do you need the option, you need the mindset. Many people, if you go to them and say, things are going to be bad, they will say, okay, I don't care. I want to stay here.
Or I'll deal with it then, as if they'll have uber prescience to know exactly when it's coming.
And don't worry, it'll be okay. But I'm read enough to know that when things change, it can be extremely serious. If you're not prepared, you better at least have options to do something. So that's what I'm trying to give my children.
And you mentioned that your daughter, to those who say, well, how are my kids going to fit in overseas? She just won election to the student council president.
Yeah, to my shock, my daughter goes to a school where everybody's it's a girls' school. They're all Chinese, but they had an election for student council president recently, and to our delight, she won. Something's right. She's fitting in very, very well because she is the student council president, and when they have assembly and they need a Chinese girl, she's the Chinese girl.
What do you see at the overlay? Because I think venture capitalist was an idea of investing in economies that maybe people generally don't think about. What do you see, because you mentioned having options, with venture capitalist and nomad capitalist, internationalization? How do those two come together?
I'm very impressed by what you're doing or trying to do because everybody does need to learn and know about the rest of the world and know about options. If nothing else, there are always countries rising, people rising, industries rising, and if you know about them, you might take advantage of those opportunities and you might become very successful. So it is an extremely good option for people to have.
So second citizenship, you talked about that's important to you.
It should be important for everybody.
Having a residence permit, so Singapore, perhaps a country someone can move to now, not likely to become a citizen, doesn't really allow for dual citizenship. That could be a place you live. So you're all in favor of having a passport, having a residence. Banking, I think you mentioned.
Well, I'm mainly all for having an option. And if you don't have the option and something happens, you're stuck. Even if you want to do something, which many people won't do because of the mindset, but you would have the option. I mean, if tomorrow something dramatic happens, I hope my family and I can do something else because we have the mindset and the knowledge and the passports and the preparation, bank accounts, investments. Just have the option is very important. And you hope you never need it. You hope you never, ever need it. But if you do, it's too late.
You've approached this, though, as an adventure. And so while you've lived in Singapore for a long time now, if you woke up tomorrow and Singapore was no longer the friendly place, I don't see any indication why that would be the case. But if that were to happen, how would you approach this as an adventure that you need to go to one of those other places? Because I think that trips a lot of people up, that, hey, I want to go one place and then I'm done.
You should have the knowledge. As I said about my children, I'm trying to give them the exposure and the knowledge of the rest of the world. My daughters have been to more countries than I'd heard of when I was their age. And who knows what will happen. But if something happens, at least I hope they have the mindset to say, oh my gosh, disaster is here. Now they can sit there and say, I'll figure it out. Or they can sit there and figure out, okay, what do I do now? Where do I go? How do I survive this? History is full of wars, natural disasters, economic disasters. History is full of changes that require people to change. I'm from the United States. Everybody in the United States, except for the American Indians, came from somewhere else at one time or another, because somebody in their family decided there are better options elsewhere. Why don't I take advantage of it?
And they hold those ancestors in high esteem, and yet somehow it's interesting that the idea of them moving is not to be held in high esteem. Never figured that one out.
I mean, I have run into people in the United States who have immigrated to the United States, and they start bad-mouthing other immigrants. I said, wait a minute, you're a foreigner, you're an immigrant, what are you talking about? And they always say, but they are different. They're different from me when I was doing it.
And they say this is different. I mean, one thing you watch the politicians in the United States, the greatest country in the history, not just now, but the history of the world, as if these politicians, they've studied 10,000 years. And I say to myself, you were talking about the rise and fall of countries, said China's come back multiple times, but they all eventually fall.
Well, historically, yes, every country, no matter who has been on top, they've all declined, except, I mean, China's declined several times and been disaster, but China, for whatever reason, is the only country that's been at the bottom and risen to the top 3 or 4 times. I don't know why yet. I'm trying to figure it out, but nobody else has done that. But wherever you are, chances are something's going to go wrong in your country eventually. And if it happens, you can say, I don't care. Or you can say, well, wait a minute, my great-grandfather got on a boat and went across the sea and made life better for me and my children. I should think about it.
Is there a cultural entrepreneurship in, let's say, China? You say they've risen multiple times. Is it something like that that's caused them to be resilient, in your opinion?
I have been trying to figure it out, Andrew. If I can, I'll get rich. You know, we all will. You can figure it out, perhaps, but I don't know what it is. Something has happened to cause the Chinese to revive several times.
What do you credit Singapore for? I saw something recently very boldly saying it's the leadership. I think that's important. People who maybe don't live in Singapore said, well, the geography is good. What do you credit Singapore's amazing turnaround?
If you look at a globe, Singapore is the most important port and therefore the world. So the location is helped dramatically. And as you know, Singapore became a country, independent country in 1965. Well, if you remember your history, that's when Asia started booming. Japan, Korea, all these places that were backwaters or disasters in the 60s and 70s and 80s had a huge boom. Asia did. So Singapore was at the right place at the right time. Now, the guy who was running Singapore did some very smart things. He insisted on bilingualism. He insisted that everybody save a huge amount of their income. And he actually took their income and made them save it and made them invest it. So if you save and you invest and you educate, especially bilingually, and you're at the right place, chances are you will be successful.
Do you see some of the other countries, now there's the Singapore of this, the Singapore of that. People talk about Rwanda's the Singapore of Africa, or Uruguay could be the Singapore of South America. Are there other pending Singapores that you're aware of, and does any country ever come close, or is there much more fragmentation?
Well, if it were that easy, Andrew, all we'd have to do is just go around and peddle the method. I see good things happening in Uzbekistan now. Uzbekistan was an old Soviet republic, which was a disaster. The Soviets ruined it, and it was a disaster. I went there a few times, but now the people running it, back to your point about leadership, these people seem to be doing the right thing. They think they know what has to be done, and they seem to be doing it. Saving, investing, all of the things that make societies successful. I see what's happening there. I look around the world. I see possibly good things happening in Colombia. You know, Colombia was ravaged by civil war for decades. One of the things I have learned, if you go to a country near the end of a war or a civil war, chances are you're going to make a lot of money because everything's cheap. Nobody has optimism, and new ideas can go a long way. But back to the ones that I see things happening in Colombia. I think I see things happening in Uzbekistan. Rwanda certainly has good press. One of the things that happened that helped Rwanda a lot was, after the massacre, everybody felt guilty, and so the Western countries put a lot of money into Rwanda. It's got an astonishing infrastructure with all of this guilt money. I'm not saying it's bad, but it certainly helped them enormously. So if you can find some kind of change, positive change in a country or a society, you might have a great success.